I'm Matt Carpenter.
And I'm Peg Keogh.
Welcome to the College Podcast. We are going to be your ultimate guides in helping you figure out how to navigate this maze in such a way that you don't lose your minds or your wallets. Let's get started. Okay, everybody, welcome to the College Podcast. We get a special edition today. Good news, bad news. Bad news, no Peggy today. So you're stuck with these two college aid bros. We'll do our best. So we got a special edition. I'm calling it the Get to Know the CEO. Welcome, Kevin James Degnan.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carpy.
You bet. What we're going to do is a couple things. I mean, for the most part, Kevin, or Degs as we call him, does very little in terms of front facing. So a lot of our audience and ecosystem probably doesn't know a whole lot about him. So I want to try to change that. We'll get to know him a little bit. And then we want to talk about this problem that is our college system in the United States. So, number one, historically, how did we get here, or from our point of view? And more importantly, how can we solve it? Which has been a hot topic for a long time, especially over the last couple of months. And we're excited to address that problem because we think with some of these sweeping changes now is a great opportunity. I guess from your perspective, just like number one, we'll talk about solutions, but how do we get here? Just as a country, when I say here, I mean $1.7 trillion in debt. Everybody knows college out of control prices. And you could say in summary, just not working for a lot of people. Of course, it still is for a lot of people, but for too many people, I would argue, our system's not really working.
Yep. Yeah, that's so ever since joining, right, and really sinking my teeth in it, you try to figure out the root cause of the problem, right? We can see the symptoms, right? We see the student debt crisis is whatever, $1.8 trillion with a T trillion, right? GDP of Canada. You see the individual families, the dropout rates, like all the stuff we see. Those are symptoms, all right? And so, like, given my brain, I'm like, well, what's the root cause here, right? We got to just take a step back and figure out, well, what's something fundamentally not right? Right. And so in researching this and looking at it, again, we look at this stuff every day. You kind of look at it, I phrase it like, for understandable reasons in our country's history, right? We've had very good intentions that resulted in like pretty bad unintended consequences, which again, student debt crisis, the cost of college, right? The college cost bubble, which is exactly what it is, right? $100,000, $50,000, $60,000 for state schools. Like clearly the markets aren't functioning the way you'd think, and again, the amount of debt folks, students have themselves plus their parents to get a job that's not even helping them, service that debt. The grad school issues even more kind of, harsh in a lot of ways, where just the cost and the risk to being taken, it doesn't match up, right? So then as we go back in time, right, you look at like, well, how did we get here, right? And the way I would just summarize it quickly, and again, we're working on kind of like a position paper, I would say, to help address this. But the first, back in 1945, right, when the student loan programs in the U.S. started, it was off the Sputnik kind of event, right, where our government thought, and right in some ways, we're behind in terms of maths and sciences and these other areas, so engineering, where we need our population to get more educated quicker, right? In very key areas, right? For defense reasons, for and all sorts of things. The GI Bill was such a huge success, right? Coming off of World War II, that the kind of direct loan programs, it wasn't called that at the time, but was started, right? It was basically like, we're not going to make college free, right? We're going to keep that part of the private market, so to speak, intact, but we want to facilitate people going to school. So that was the start of like the student loan program that exists today. I call that the era of access, like the first 35 years, like through 1980, it was just like access, get more people to go to college, right? And the attendance rates, the population, the ratio of people going to college and graduate college degrees, it was successful, right? Very successful. It achieved that goal, right?
So just to bust in here, so from your take here is 1945, call it, and is where this kind of start. More people to be going to college. Number one, we got to beat the Russians, and and we just got home from World War II. The GI Bill was a big hit, so those kind of two things are just this explosion of sorts.
Yep. It was basically open up the federal funds and capital to facilitate our population to go to college, right? We have all these veterans that were taking advantage of this great program. Why don't we do it for every citizen, every eligible citizen, right? Again, great intent and very effective, right? For those first 35, 40 years, give or take. Yep. What happens though, and then again, any economist will kind of stare at this and tell you like this probably could have been foreseen, although I don't blame anybody necessarily, is with the free flowing of capital, right? There's got to be someone on the other end that says, okay, here's an opportunity to kind of take advantage or capture some of that capital, right? And so what's happens over the, kind of starting in the 80s, 90s, and to today almost basically is like the cost of college starts to skyrocket, right? Completely out of step with inflation. And this is because it's basically, it's easy capital, right? The conduit are students and families, but like it's the government and private lenders basically just funneling millions and trillions, billions and trillions of dollars over the decades to higher education, right? This is good, right? This is how markets are supposed to work. Create more private, more schools, more colleges, more opportunity, meet the demand that's out there. There's this portion of the population that wants to get a college degree. Let's, facilitate, the government facilitates it with money, programs that come up. However, it has become, and again, this is exemplified by the student debt crisis and just the cost of college today. It's gotten completely out of whack, right? So like I call it like 1980 through now as like the kind of like the era of easy money was one name I'm kind of toying with, but it's kind of the era of aspiration, right? Where we're like, everybody was aspiring to the American dream. You got to go to college. You got to get it. That's the only way to get a good job, join the middle class. And again, for a lot of people, like you said, Carby, it's like, it's true. That works, right? It is a very effective way to improve your quality of life. But because of the free flowing amount of capital, right, and then just some of the changes we've made over the years, and with good intention in mind, we've made it so that basically the colleges are just, jacking up their prices. Their endowments are growing. Accessibility is no longer the currency of the realm, right? It's not, it's more of scarcity, where admissions rates are 2%, it's 1%, it's 5%. Like it's become as our mutual boyfriend, Scott Galloway says, it's a Chanel bag. It's the logo, it's the brand, it's the branding you have. It's not the actual experience you're paying for. And I'll stop and let you kind of chime in, because, you and I have talked about this, but not in depth, but the ROI that you're getting, right? The return on investment is so detached now from what it is the money's being used for. And there's specific things we can change, it should change based on our assessment of this stuff, staring at this stuff every day.
Yeah, and I know you want to go here too, and you can layer in. But when we talk about, okay, so what exactly has the federal government done to contribute in the private market, to contribute to these colleges out of control costs? They've written a blank check. Right. And again, I all started with the best intentions. Let's make college possible for everybody. But now, everybody at a minimum, every student at a minimum is guaranteed $27,000 over the course of 4 years. Yeah. Right. That's just the starting point. They don't need established credit. They don't need a cosigner. That is guaranteed. They have to hit a button on the computer, and that money goes literally directly from the federal government to the colleges. Right. So it's almost telling the colleges, well, okay, we can start our pricing here because we're getting that from every single student. Okay. And then when we look at when the federal government program, a loan program for parents called the PLUS loan, almost everybody qualifies for this loan. Right. You don't need any income, quite literally. You can be unemployed, zero income. You can have low credit, and you are guaranteed, or you're not guaranteed. There are certain minimums, but are they pretty accessible. Okay. But you could borrow $100,000 a year, right? You could be an unemployed single parent with 3 kids and borrow $100,000 a year, per student, and you're going to get that. And it's just, and again, so the federal government knows, even if this person cannot afford to come here, they're going to get the money. So, why wouldn't we increase our prices?
That's exactly what it is, right? And again, just be clear, we're not accusing anybody at these colleges and universities of nefarious actions. It's just the way the market is, let them behave, right? Again, if these if money's out there just floating around, and you're competing with other colleges, which they are for students, this is how normal participants in a market behave, right? And you nailed it. It's a blank check from the government to go to college, right? In some ways, it's become sort of an entitlement for like anybody, American eligible citizen or eligible non-citizen. You are going to get as much money as you possibly want to go to college, with no thought about where is this actually going, what are you doing with it. It is, again, it's an entitlement with some really bad repercussions, right? And because the other side of this coin is, unlike any other uncollateralized loan, right, or loan that an individual will take out, you cannot get rid of it in bankruptcy, right? So like the bad side here is it's not free money. It can handcuff you for the rest of your life. And if you're not getting the value from this money that it was intended for, good education, good experience, good network, better job, right? You're on the hook for that money, and you can never get rid of it. Right? So this is also where markets aren't acting correctly or as you'd expect, because there's direct interference, right? So like, again, colleges can jack the prices up, lenders can just keep throwing money at people, because guess what? They're never on the hook for it. right? And this theme is what we're talking. So as we talk here a lot, right, we're talking about, all right, there's clearly, there seems to be an appetite in our country now for some sort of reform, right? The Department of Education is being, slimmed down, to put it politely. What it should be used for is in question. It just feels like there's a really good, and plus the symptoms we're talking about, the student debt crisis, accessibility to college, endowments of some of these colleges are just astronomical. There's clearly an appetite for reform. And so what we're focusing on, this is what we're going to, our position paper is going to elaborate and lay out, is like, well, we want to move towards like this era of accountability, right? Where every major stakeholder in this process, so the student, their family, the lenders themselves, that includes the federal government, the colleges, right? They all should have some clear accountability and skin in the game, right? And I'd love to get into details now, and we will on the position paper, but we shouldn't let this appetite for reform go to waste, right? If we're going to tear things down, let's rebuild it the way it should be. And I think there's some very clear, reasonable things we can do to make that happen.
And I think, and we can decide if we want to, get into our solutions now or pick it up later. But this is, as you're talking, it brought up another point for me, which again is not new in terms of, our conversations, and is also related, I think, to the problem and the solution. But I think right now, in some ways, we give consumers too much credit, or said another way, not enough guardrails, right? So if we go to buy a home, right, if we want to buy a home, hopefully, the bank's going to say, they're going to put it into their calculations. Look, according to your income and assets, et cetera, you have to go find a home that's within this budget, because otherwise you're going to be in trouble and we're going to be in trouble. Again, we have these guardrails, because I think about myself, right? I want to say when Rosie and I bought our home, whatever it was, 12, 13 years ago, they probably said, hey, you qualify for 400,000, whatever the number was, right? And it's like, of course I'm going to go, or for me personally, and I don't think I'm too unique here, I'm going to go I'm like only looking at homes that are, $399,000 or whatever. If I could have said, like College Works, like, hey, look, you should really only go for $399 or not even that, but go ahead and pick out whatever home you want. I would have said, I'll figure it out. And just like everybody does with college, like,
right.
If we don't have these guardrails, especially when, again, you're talking about a 17 and 18-year-old kid that just wants to go to this school, and their parents wants to put this college on the back of their sticker to say, my kid's going to, such and such place, with zero guardrails.
Yeah, and intentionally or not, one of the examples we're going to talk about in the position paper, and like just in the research you're doing, is the housing crisis, right? That is a great parallel to what's happening, right? There was easy money flowing around. You could, back then, they didn't care who you were and your qualifications. They would give you a house twice what you could afford. Or, you already have a $500,000 house, buy another one, right? Like the money flowed because, and again, that just because of the distorted market incentives, right? That was going on, which is what's going on in, college, the market for higher education in the U.S. Those guardrails are needed, right? Save people from themselves. If everybody has proper skin in the game, then their actions will follow, right? It's not as simple as that, but in some ways it is as simple as that, right?
From a meta level, it is. And again, simple doesn't mean easy.
Correct.
Of course, by any stretch. But so I guess on that point, Degnan, again, I'm sure we'll have you back on to unpack each of these in more detail. But why don't you spell out some of, in your mind, these main data? What are some of our solutions? What are some of the changes we should make, that we can make, that are going to address?
Yeah, I'll run through them, and again, we'll elaborate on why these are. There's going to be opponents and opponents of all of these, right? And so we get that, and I'm excited for the conversation, because again, we haven't come into this lighthearted, right? We spent a lot of time thinking about it. But the first is we have to reform the way the federal government lends money, right? I think we have to remove the guaranteed everybody gets one, the rate's the same for everyone, doesn't matter your income approach, right? That was done for accessibility, right? Everyone, regardless of their situation, should have access to higher education in the United States. We can maintain access without writing blank checks for everybody. So we need to do that, right? As part of that, we also need to reform bankruptcy law and include student loans and college-related loans in those, right? It's just credit cards are similar. They're uncollateralized, right? So, but they're allowed to remove. Medical bills are also similar, where you can get rid of those in bankruptcy, but student loans aren't. I mean, that will probably have a lot of opponents who don't like it, but that's where the true risk involved in the loans being given isn't felt by anybody, because it's more or less a backstop. As in, Matt Carpenter borrowed $100,000 from Kevin Degnan, you're never getting rid of that. Again, it's not never, but the bar to have that removed, again, is so high. It is extremely rare for someone to lose that. So get the government out of guaranteed loans for everybody, allow bankruptcy for student loans, right? And there's ways for new and existing loans to both fit into that. So 3, I would also say, the colleges themselves, right, can be involved in this. And this is kind of twofold. One, I think colleges will not like that this blank check's now gone, right, from the government. And a lot of them have budgets and infrastructure that are unsustainable based on, real market dynamics, right? I think one of the examples you used, Carp, is like, if a restaurant's making bad food that costs a lot, right, they're going to go out of business. And I don't want to say this if schools that go out of business because of this, but some of them will, right? Because they haven't figured out how to be a sustainable business that's providing what it is people are actually paying for, which is, again, a better life, to get a better job, to, support, their aspirations. So I think colleges will feel the pain of this, but for the colleges who still need to fill their beds and want to kind of join the party here, is they can be a cosigner for loans, right? So in this example, if the government's out of the guaranteed loan business, private lenders will come in, they'll truly assess what's going on, right? In the Matt Carpenter's application to Stonehill College, they'll look at what is he studying? What was his GPA? What does Stonehill's results look like? And if the lender says, oh, I'm not sure that this risk is worth it, or it is at this rate, the college can come in and say, we'll underwrite some of this. We'll sign on and say, we'll basically guaranteeing that the result is going to be what we say it's going to be. And that can get the lender, the borrower, a better rate, right? So colleges can have some specific skin in the game where they're underwriting what it is they're signing up for, or what they're currently making the students sign up for.
Yeah, I have a couple comments there. I mean, because we're in total agreement. I mean, the first one is in terms of colleges going out of business. Nobody is rooting for this, but it's healthy. It's healthy in markets for businesses to go out of business and compete and, and innovate. What is there when I look at colleges that I think right now that there's not true accountability for the outcomes. There's not true accountability. Even if the most graduates are not getting a real ROI on a college's investment, those checks are still coming. Right. So there's not this true accountability. They don't have this kind of true skin in the game. And again, churn is healthy, right? Churn is a healthy thing. And I think by having at least giving colleges the option to kind of put their money where their mouth is, there's a real accountability in the outcomes of their students.
That's the intent, right? Is say, all right, the faucet's now turned off. Right? People are going to pay what it is the risk markets say they should. And again, that'll be more accurate. People aren't going to like it. And we'll touch on how we maintain accessibility in a second, but that's where the colleges should have some stake in it. They should be like, all right, no, you're giving our potential students a rate that's unfair because we're going to get them where we say they're going to get them to. All right, then sign the dotted line right next to them. And then if they don't make it, you're on the hook as well. Guess what? They're going to be more scrutinous of who they bring in. You know what I mean? They're going to make sure that you stay in class and you show up. They're going to make sure you graduate and you're not taking fluffy majors that you can't, aren't going to give you a job, right? That's where the accountability is going to come into play. That's going to make some people uncomfortable, but it's the way the market would need to work in order to get the results we want.
You know what? And again, maybe there's some innovation. Maybe a lot of these colleges have these huge marketing budgets to attract students in. Maybe some of that gets reallocated to marketing towards employers and making sure that they're
exactly
recruiting these great students from their institution. Right. That's just one example of how can you innovate? How can you make yourself better? Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is arguably the most important one because I'm sure some people are listening to this going, so these guys don't care about the student that comes from little to no income, that doesn't have anybody to sign off on his loans, that they don't have any help. How do we solve the accessibility issue, which is top of the list for us?
Yeah, so I as part of this, we think the Pell Grant program should stay in place, right? We actually can bolster that in some ways, and I don't think colleges won't be forbidden from giving need-based aid, right, to low-income families. So, like, if you're a straight A student, perfect SAT, ACT, and you're going to Harvard, they could still underwrite you for free because of the endowment they have, and we'll touch on that in a second. But the way I see it, the kind of macro policies that we should try to put in place is basically making community college and trade schools free. And this is one of the more interesting ones where, like, if folks don't want the federal government involved, I'm actually fine with that, right? So if we want to find a way to take some federal funding and put it towards state community colleges and trade schools, that's fine, right? That's a great way to that. I think that's a great answer to the turning the faucet off for the direct loans, right? Or the college loans. But if states do it on their own, having states compete is also fun, right? 35 different states have some version of free community colleges, right? I think the states, if we put this in place, the federal government's not involved or limited, the states themselves will have to find a way to do this. And again, this is a good thing, having states compete with one another, figuring out, which making community colleges better, right? So that a lot of these kids who are going to college now are taking on debt and then not graduating. You know what they should have done? They probably should have gone to community college, or even better, a trade school, right? Look at the trades, right? We got to as a country, we need this clear demand for the trades. So refilling the trade school pipeline with the folks that were probably on the fence about going to college in the first place, would be a great thing, right? That's a great thing we should encourage. So I think we maintain accessibility by making community colleges free, trade schools free. It can be subsidized by the federal level or just left up to the states. The states that don't do it will pay the consequences. The states that do it will reap the benefits, right? And then again, a kind of a related note, one thing we see is the kind of the haves and the have-nots in higher education, right? You got the Ivies who, again, I don't know about the $1 billion endowment that Harvard and Dartmouth and these different programs have, right? They clearly have they have more demand for their programs than they could ever have, right? And truthfully, you could argue, and I would argue, they're no longer providing the mission that their nonprofit status requires. They're not, yes, for the whatever it is, the 1,500 freshmen or maybe less than that at Harvard that get in. And I don't want to just pick on Harvard. There's a lot of schools that fit this, but that's not enough, right? To sit there and get in the millions, tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue that the government's owed from a for-profit business like theirs, it isn't justified by the small number of American citizens that get in and use that program, right? There should be, and it has to be, some accountability from these schools to deliver on this nonprofit mission. And the answer is simple. If they don't, they lose the nonprofit status and we tax them, right? And that tax revenue can pay for the free community colleges and trade schools, okay? And again, the budgets, depending on the state, right, and the programs, this could be a net wash if these for-profit masquerading as nonprofits don't increase accessibility and don't meet the criteria that we require as a country to give them this nonprofit status. That's a way, you can offset some of the increases in spending. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one too, but
I mean, 100%. It's like, yeah, we're picking on colleges a little bit here. Again, they're not the only stakeholder, right? Us as consumers, right? We have culpability here. We're the ones signing on the dotted line. There's a private sector in Wall Street. The federal government has a role to play. But when we talk about colleges, it's like there are these institutions that, again, are getting these blank checks now. Right. And oftentimes we know it, and we've seen this, to give some colleges credit. I have seen, and some of them are on our teammates, say, we don't think you should come here. This is not a responsible decision based on the information we have. Now, not enough colleges do. So they're getting these blank checks, guaranteed money that can't go into bankruptcy. They're not responsible for the outcome, right, of the return on the investment that these students are ultimately making on them. All the while, they're not paying any taxes, and they're not supposed to go out of business. Yeah. So it's like that's something's not right there, right? Something's not right there.
We've been subsidizing these colleges for a long time, and again, we have the greatest higher education system in the world, best quality, right? And people were the envy of the rest of the world, no doubt about it. But I think the population and generations have been on the hook for the investment that we've been making inadvertently over the years. And we need to change that. Right now is the time for change. Again, the whole point is that accountability is supposed to be, let's just all be aware of where we are today, fix the things we can fix, and keep the things we like, right? Accessibility. Again, one thing I'll add too is like a thought we have is if you go to community college and you graduate and you do a great job, right? Automatic achievement grants from the Pell program, right? Add that. Right. If you get done and you want to go and finish at a 4-year school, the government should subsidize that. Right. You've proven it. Right. You are accountable. You get achievement grants to kind of, again, get people where they need to get to. Is that as easy as just, getting a blank check from the government and going to 4-year college off the bat? No, it's not as easy. But I think we have to be okay with that.
Yeah. It's you've earned it as opposed to you're entitled to it. Right. Correct. And that's an important distinction. So, yeah. And again, I guess kind of one of my closing thoughts that's in terms of which is, I guess, more of a reiteration, but we need to have a closer construct of some type of infrastructure that has checks and balances where again, it's not just the students and families or whatever that are accountable here. There's some guardrails. There is some, no, you can't go get $5 million home just because it's your favorite one, right, on your list. We're not setting you up for success, Carp, right? Go earn some more, and then maybe you can get that home, go to that college, whatever, right? So there is a, I don't know if it's a harshness, but there needs to be a reset in terms of what are we entitled to versus, what do we earn? And some people are going to be on the wrong side of that, and it sucks. But I don't know. Some of this is a harsh reality. We got to make some hard changes that are. So I don't know. Do you have any kind of, I guess, summarizing thoughts?
I mean, that's it. I mean, I think it, like I said kind of earlier on, is there's an appetite now to make some hard changes, right? To really stare at how we've designed things for better or worse and say, okay, this worked, that didn't, and implement some of these reforms that I think there's truly an appetite for now, right? Let's not just burn things down. Let's rebuild it the right way, and we can change things so that accessibility and the things that make the American dream what it is are there. But again, it's less entitlement, more accountability. So that's the era of accountability we're trying to lay out. It's really the intent. And again, I encourage debate here.
Yeah.
Again, we'll provide more details and be sending more out to the markets and the ether here to see what people think. And again, I look forward to a healthy dialogue about it.
Yeah, we just touched on the surface, right? These are the really high level bullet points that we're flushing out in real time. But I think our attitude is with these changes that are taking place and some of them being pretty drastic right now, let's look at this as a blank canvas. If we could kind of quote unquote start over, what would we change that can have better outcomes for more people, right? And even just like you said, it may mean pushing some people in a direction that's different from your traditional 4-year undergraduate degree. It might mean some colleges going out of business or, making some wholesale changes. So some short-term pain for what we think is going to be long-term benefit to more than others. So, All right, Deggy, we've carried on here. Thanks for coming on. Hope to have you back. Love you, mean it.
Yeah, appreciate it, buddy. I also, for the record, when we originally thought of doing a College Aid Pro podcast, it was going to be the Peggy and Deggy hour. So I think you stole my partner in crime, and that'll be a future spinoff.
Well, yeah. Well, I hope to never see that day.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Out there. Bye.